President Blackwell, we're ready to go when you are.
All right. Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order of the San Diego Water District, a special meeting held on Wednesday, January 17th, 2024. And Madam Clerk, will you please call roll?
Board Member Lyons,
Present.
Board Member Ehlers,
Here.
Board Member Hinsey,
Here?
Vice President Krantz,
Here.
President Blackwell.
Here.
Record will show that all members are present, and please note that Water District Board members do receive an independent stipend of $100 for convening Water District meetings pursuant to San Diego Water District Resolution Number 89-07.
Okay, we have one agenda item for this special meeting, and that is an update on the San Diego Water District's 2024 water rate study. And I believe there is a staff report. Turn it over to you.
Thank you, President Blackwell and members of the board. The district aims to perform a study every 2 to 3 years to ensure that its water rates are sufficient to meet the revenue requirements of the water enterprise. The district's last 3-year rate study was completed in September 2021. On August 16, 2023, board members authorized staff to enter into an agreement with Raftelis Financial Consultants, or RFC, to perform a district water rate cost of service study. The 3 biggest issues facing the district that RFC was tasked with addressing as they undertook this study are: number 1, the loss of the district's cheapest source of water from Lake Hodges due to the DSOD restriction on Lake Hodges Dam. The result of the restriction on Lake Hodges has caused a tremendous increase in water purchase costs paid to the San Diego County Water Authority, as the district has had to replace its cheapest source of water with more expensive raw water. Number 2, the accompanying loss of the local water are the anticipated costs to repair and replace the dam itself. Estimates to replace the dam ran into the hundreds of millions of dollars, and the district is contractually obligated to pay its share. Lastly, a large portion of the water infrastructure in the district was built in the 1950s and is almost reaching the end of its estimated life. The aging infrastructure could compromise system reliability, therefore replacements must be undertaken. This means the district's CIP and budget will need to increase significantly to address this capital need. At the November 8, 2023 workshop, staff and RFC presented the district's long-range financial plan with these 3 issues in mind. Based on direction from that workshop, a rate scenario has been developed for board consideration. The scenario includes increases to the district's water rate and meter service charges effective on July 1, 2024, July 1, 2025, and July 1, 2026. It should be noted that the 2nd and 3rd year increases are recommended as an up-to amount, meaning that if the district's financial conditions are better than projected, staff will ask the board to consider a lower adjustment for the 2nd and 3rd year. I will now turn it over to Steve Vavnon of RFC to discuss the proposed rate scenario.
Thank you, Mary. Good afternoon, board members. Again, my name is Steve Gagnon with Raftelis Financial Consultants, and we have a short presentation for you today. And going to the bottom of this slide, I'll just talk about the goals. The goals are to present the draft revised financial plan, present draft rates and customer bill impacts, and then take your feedback. So the next few slides, I'm just going to are a reminder of what we presented in November, and then we'll go into the revised financial plan. So a water rate study has 4 steps. We're essentially in between step 3 and step 4. We have draft rates, and we're presenting them to you today. So last time, we talked about things that Mary just went through, things that affect your water costs to serve water. We talked, like Mary just mentioned, we talked about the decreased and more costly Lake Hodges water. We talked about how your capital costs are increasing. I work with a lot of public work directors, and I hear quite often that Project X was $1 million, and after the pandemic, it went to $1.5 million. We talked about inflation, which is what this graph shows. A reminder that the top line is basically the inflation of water and wastewater rates across America, and it compares it to the two bottom lines, which is your general goods, your CPI for general goods. And then lastly, the last bullet point in this slide, we talked about how, especially for 2023 was a very wet year, so you had lower sales because when it rains a lot, people don't water their lawns and you lose revenue. So that's just a reminder. And then we put in front of you proposed revenue increases. And we had last time 15%, 15%, and 15% over the next fiscal years, and 3 fiscal years. And looking at the bottom left graph, where the red circle is there, with these revenue adjustments, you ended up with about $12 million in reserves at the end of the study, projected reserves at the end of the study. However, I wouldn't remember if I were you, but I put forth this slide, and I mentioned that revenue increases are not the exact same as customer bill impacts because we do something known as a cost of service study, which derives the rate for each tier. We have to do this because San Juan Capistrano. We have to go from the very beginning and derive a rate to the very end and show how it was derived. So I mentioned that customer bill impacts depend on the derivation of the tiered rates. And like Mary just mentioned, you have big changes to your Lake Hodges water. So that I knew was going to impact customers, but we hadn't run the numbers yet. Now we've run the numbers, and indeed, your Tier 1 customers are severely impacted, but as you'll see in a second, we took steps to try to minimize that. So historically, you receive about 2,000 acre-feet from Lake Hodges. Now it's expected to be anywhere from 500 to 750. And then, of course, less Lake Hodges water means that there's a higher rate for Tier 1 because Tier 1 was allocated the cost of Lake Hodges water. So 90% of Tier 1 water came from Lake Hodges. And now there's less of it, which means you have to buy imported water, which affects the cost of water in Tier 1. So we ran the numbers, and under that scenario, with a revenue adjustment of 15% and 500 acre-feet of Lake Hodges water, you're looking at the bill impacts for single-family residential customers, which are 78% of your customers. So right in the middle of this slide here, in bold, is your average customer using 22 HCF, and moving to the right, you see the bill impact would have been, their bill would have gone up $38 for an increase of 22%. And a low water user, looking at the top of this chart, a low water user using 10 HCF, moving over to the right, their bill would have gone up by $26 or 26%. And so I think staff and the team realized that this might cause, let's just say, indigestion. So we said, what can we do to minimize these bill impacts? And so we're presenting to you today a revised financial plan. So here are the updates to the financial plan. First, we were able to reduce certain CIP projects by $2.5 million, and if you would like more information about that, Isam can expand on that later. We also found out that your last bond payment of $633,000 will be paid out of bond reserves, so that frees up that chunk of cash. We assumed that you will get 750 acre-feet of local water instead of 500 acre-feet, and that's based on last year's actual local water. You received just under 1,000, and you're right now you've received over 500, so you will receive more than 500. So we're now assuming 750 instead of 500, so that helps. So that's the first 3 bullets have to do with reducing the overall revenue. Something else that we did since the last time is we're now separating out the recycled water rate increase from potable. Before it was kind of all one big happy fund, if you will. But we found that recycled costs were not increasing as much as potable. And not only that, but you're selling a bit more recycled water. So you have fixed costs. When you spread those over more customers, the rate goes down for everybody. So we decided to break out recycled on its own, and you'll see different revenue adjustments for recycled in an upcoming slide. The next couple of slides are just reminders. So this is the CIP that is being funded by the rates you'll see in a second. It's around $5 to $6 million every year. And then just as a reminder that these are your reserve targets that you're planning for when you set rates. You're trying to have, ideally, around, let's just say, 14 to 19 million over the course of this study. Actually, 14 to 18 million. Okay? So here's the revised financial plan. So in the top of this graph, or of this top of the table, you see the potable revenue increase. So you see it's 9, 12, 12 instead of 15, 15, 15. And then recycled revenue is now 9, 6, 6. And what I want to point out is, do you remember in the prior slide, you were, if the model was correct, you were ending up with around $12 million in reserves at the end of the study. And so I'm pointing out again in the red circle, you're ending up in the same spot, but you've cut your CIP a little bit. We've made assumptions about Lake Hodges water, and you've got that $600,000 debt payment that all has helped to get you to the same spot, but with lower revenue adjustments. And so let's take a look at what that means for rates and what it means for customer bill impacts. This table shows your single-family class. Remember, these are bi-monthly bills. And looking at the top table there, again in bold, is your average single-family customer. And so the bill impact here is about 15%. If you remember in the prior, it was 22, I believe. So this is a much more palatable bill increase. And you can see for your low water user, your 10, that's 19%. I believe it was 26 in the prior table. And then this is 78% of your customers. We have your other classes. You can see single-family ag is 0.2% of your customers. And you may have a question here. Let me just take care of it before you ask it. Is that you can see that the single-family customers, you can see their bill impacts are in the teens, right? Or at least for your average customer there, it's 15. And then for these other classes, like for single-family ag, you see that it's around 6%. That's because they're much less dependent on Tier 1 water, and they use so much more. They use a lot more water, and the rate in the upper tiers isn't changing as much. So their bill becomes more of a function of the rate in the upper tiers, so their bill impact is less. So I hope that clarifies why, single family, it's because they're really susceptible to that Tier 1 rate. But you can see single family commercial down there, you see they're using, at the bottom table, they're using 22, and you can see the bill impact is comparable, 15% to your single family residential. So the rest of the slides show the bill impacts for your other customers. This is your multifamily class. You got multifamily, multifamily ag, multifamily commercial. And then lastly, we have you have three classes that have a uniform rate. They're not tiered. So you have ag and commercial, institutional, and landscaping. And they have a uniform rate, so because they're not tiered, they're not being impacted as much. And they're much more high water users. So, and then lastly, we have recycled water, and again, their revenue adjustments are a little bit less, as you saw. I would hope or think this is good news. who would protest a rate going down, but as you can see over on the right, they are in the or the mid-single-digit decreases, 6 or 7%. And I believe we were speaking, and Isam, you were saying that SEJPA, they're proposing to go from 3.9% to 5%, which really is just compared to the way other things are increasing, just isn't as much. So that's one reason why recycled isn't going up as much.
Yeah. That's what the proposal was last week. It seems like there are changes, and they have delayed the cost of service study that they're conducting. So we'll just have to wait and see where they're going with the new evaluation of their rates. But it doesn't seem like it's going much higher than the 5% at this point.
So the next two slides just simply show the rates and charges, so you have seen them. I think I'll just leave them up for 20 seconds so you can look at them. Looking at your fixed service charge, it's currently $53. It'll go to $58, $65, and $73. And I will do the same for your volumetric rate. You have on the left is your single-family class, on the right is multifamily, and then your uniform customers. At the very bottom, you see recycled water. It would dip for 1 year and then go back up. And this is a bill comparison with surrounding agencies. I like to say, everyone always wants to know how they compare, but I like to say that you have to take this with a grain of salt because it's like comparing yourself to your neighbor, right? It's easy for a neighbor to either neglect their system or maybe over-maintain their system. Maybe they haven't done a rate study in a while. I know agencies that get property tax revenue, like Irvine Ranch. They get a ton of property tax revenue. Not all agencies get property tax revenue. Some agencies have much more elevation to pump water, which costs more in electricity. So you have to, there's a lot of factors that go into this. But overall, you'd end up right in the middle of everybody. And keep in mind, I know right now that our firm's working for Olivenhain. They're doing a rate study, and a lot of these other cities are going to be doing rate studies. So this is a picture in time. Really, when July comes, some of these are going to move because they're also doing rate studies. But no matter which way you shake a stick at it, you're in the middle, which is not a bad place to be. And lastly, I'd like to finish up with drought rates. First, let me describe what drought rates are. So during a drought, you ask your customers to use less water, so your revenue decreases. A good chunk of your costs are fixed, aside from water purchases, which I'm calculating to be about 35% of your expenses. So drought rates are really there to recover lost revenue to cover your fixed costs. And once the board declares the district is in a certain drought stage, it would have the option, and I say option because there's nothing mandatory here. It's something you have in your back pocket that you can implement if you'd like. The option to implement drought rates on the volumetric rate for different drought stages as stated in your approved water shortage contingency plan. And in the bottom of this slide shows the percent increase you could levy on your volumetric rates. So if you declare you're in a level 2 drought, you have the option to increase all your volumetric rates by 11%, and so on for the rest of the different levels. That's the end of the presentation, and we'll take questions.
I will ask if we have any public comment, but I don't think we do. Okay, so are there any questions from the board members or comments? There it is. Okay, Vice President Krantz.
Thank you for the presentation. I was looking at the table with us in the middle of the rates around the region, and I wondered why Carlsbad might be at the bottom. How is it they don't have any local source? I believe they're involved in the desal. Just seems odd that they would be $11 a month less than the city of Encinitas. Any guesses?
So this is a guess. I think our firm may have worked for Carlsbad a while ago. Again, this is a guess, but I think they're just very, they haven't done a lot of rate increases. I don't know why. I think that this is correct. We've checked the numbers, but they're just very cost conscious, I guess.
Well, I'd like to be as cost conscious as they are, is I guess kind of one of the thoughts that I had, is that whatever they're doing, I'd like to do more of, but, without knowing what that is, maybe they do have some water sources that are nice. Maybe their capital projects list isn't as long as ours. I'm not sure what it might be. Sam, you look like you're ready to tell me.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna guess some of what you asked for. First of all, from our perspective, is the loss of local water is a major hit to our district as compared to Carlsbad. The other part is I know that Carlsbad last year went through rate study on the sewer side, and they increased their rates by double-digit percentage for 3 years. I don't know if they are in the process of actually doing that right now for the water side of the house, but I mean, it's very hard to compare our Carlsbad to our district just because of the fact of number of miles of pipe that they have, the CIP that they have, together with the loss of local water, which is 1/3, which we used to get and cost us $350 dollars per acre foot, as compared to now it's costing us $1,400 dollars per acre foot.
And the staff report mentions the notion of putting in to the Prop 218 rate thing an up to amount for the second and third year. Are we, is there enough in there that if our first year rates aren't high enough and we see some shakeup, that we can soften that? We can have enough pad in the second and third years to maybe offset the underestimate of costs and water sales?
This will depend on a lot of different moving targets. One of them is how much local water we can get out of Lake Hodges with the restriction in place, and if we can do that. The other part is in regards to the joint facilities CIP and its execution rates, and then how much the demand of our customers is. Yesterday, I was at the general manager's meeting for the County Water Authority. The County Water Authority, for the first time in 10 years, their actual demand for the last calendar year was 290,000 acre feet as compared to 430 acre feet. And so now the fixed cost associated with systems, water systems for all water agencies, is becoming a problem for everybody. So because, I mean, the fixed cost is there. If we are not selling any water, then you have to make up for the operation and maintenance and the CIP programs. So that's why there are so many different pieces to the puzzle and also it depends on rain events. I mean, if it rains and then our demands go down, then it most probably will not be able to play with the 12%. But if, for example, if Lake Hodges, all of a sudden we were able to go back to where we were, taking the 2,000 acre feet that we used to do on a yearly basis, then that is very doable.
So we don't want to get too creative. We want to establish these numbers based upon the current projections. And if the bottom falls out and we don't do, the first year we're upside down, we're just going to go back to either another 218 and rate studies. We're not going to wait through the whole period to readjust, are we?
I'm not quite sure that we need to go back to 218. Maybe you can help me if we say up to, because we can come to the board, because every year we're going to come up and ask for the increases, and we can say, okay, this year we only need to increase it up to 8% only.
Right.
So
I like that.
Without going
that.
to the 18.
I like the up to thing.
Yeah.
What I'm afraid of is, and it's not really, fear. Instead of having an up to that assumes everything's going to be just as we forecast, should we be taking a worst-case scenario with the up-twos and, have a couple of years' worth of increases that could possibly offset? I'm not saying we go to the top of the up-twos every time for no reason whatsoever, but if our up-two has 2 points instead of 1 point in it, doesn't that allow us some cushion in the event our first year is off and our revenues aren't what we thought they were going to be?
I mean, yeah, it all depends on what assumptions we're going to be making. I mean, we can go back to the 500 acre feet, which we originally started with. We can adjust our CIP program to that, and then we can go back to the 15, 15, 15, and then the middle or the average will be back to 22% first year, and then up to 15% would be the next year, right? If we go back to the
prior,
yeah.
it was 15, 15, 15.
So-
Yeah, but I mean, first year would be 22% for the average customer, and then 15 the year
it would be
after, and
15,
15
yes,
the
correct.
year after.
So it sounds like what you're telling me is that we have plenty of tools to make adjustments
That's correct.
as needed
Yes.
based upon the actuals instead of the projections. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Board Member Lyons.
Thank you. Isam, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you or your team have an idea of how much water, we've been down on our water we could get from Lake Hodges for many months now, and I'm not sure if we're there at a year or where we're at, but do you know how much water we've been able to get over the most recent time period?
Yes, it's last year, during the fiscal year, we were able to get approximately 1,000 acre feet. And this year, up till December, we were able to get 530. And that's why we proposed the 750, because we were, if you remember last time, we were talking about 500 acre feet as a maximum that we'll get. But it seems like, based on the restriction and based on the conditions, we were able to get more.
That makes sense. Is there a direct relationship with something that predicts how much water we can get? Like, I might think, well, it rained a lot, so there was more water behind the dam. So when it rains a lot, do we get more water? Is there a direct relationship like that?
One of the critical parts about Lake Hodges is the water quality. So it all depends on the water quality. I mean, the restriction currently is at the level of 280 feet, and we can actually withdraw water up to 265. The only issue with that, if there is no rain and there is no renewable to the water that's in the lake, the water quality becomes really bad, and it becomes really hard to actually treat
Keep
it
it.
at the Badger plant. It will require additional costs and whatever have you. But so far, with a very small blend, which is around 10 to 12% during this year, we were able to withdraw the 500 acre feet or draft the 500 acre feet from Lake Hodges.
That's interesting, because it does sound like there is a connection with the amount of rainfall, just based on
Yes.
what you're saying as far as water quality. I was thinking it was quantity, but it might be quality.
You know,
Yeah.
the only issue with the amount of water that comes in, if for one reason or another there's a major event and they open all the valves in order to release the water because of the restriction that the SOD has, so all this new water is actually going to pass by, and what you're left with is what is the existing water.
Yeah.
So it's a
Balance.
little bit of, again, there are so many assumptions that we have to work with in order for us to figure out exactly how much we can withdraw during a certain period of time.
So I have a couple other questions, if I could. So it's probably in this presentation, but I just may have missed it. I'm seeing that we're increasing our rates, and I understand it's due to the many things that were outlined, but I didn't see where it was directly related to the repair and replacement of the dam. And this may be more of a budgetary thing when we talk about our budget, but we have worked what we assume to be the costs of that, or our obligation on the costs of that, into this model. Could you point out for me where that is?
When the issue of the dam and the restrictions started, we started putting some monies in a fund so that in the future we would pay at least for the design or whatever have you in that regard. Obviously, the dam cost estimate at this point in time is somewhere between $300 and $400 million. And there's no way for us to be able to save that amount of money by the time we need to build the dam. So it most probably be grants and loans and whatever have you. But at least for the initial period, we have been including $500,000 a year for the past 3 years. And I think this year we're including $750,000, and next year another $750,000, and the year after another $750,000, just for us to be able to pay for the design, for the CEQA or environmental documents or whatever have you in that regard. But when that construction starts or when there is a bid, then we'll most probably have to work with City of San Diego and the County Water Authority regarding, the infrastructure and the grants and loans in order for us to be able to do that.
And I believe it's in the slide that's in front of you right now, the line that says Lake Hodges Capital Repairs.
Great, thank you for pointing that out. I see that now. And my last question, could you point out for me too, what was being removed from the CIP?
The Joint Facilities Master Plan, we actually got some kind of revised amount, and of the $2.5 million, I think $1.25 million is what we have been removed out of that. Let me just make sure that those are the right numbers. Yes. So half of the $2.5 million was based on the joint facilities, based on the latest update from Santa Fe Irrigation District on their capital improvements during the next 3 years. And then we reduced our asbestos pipe replacement. Since we are not going to be conducting any construction within the next 3 years, when we were just going to be putting in some monies for the first project that will be on the asbestos pipeline, we reduced that amount. Because we are in the condition assessment this year. By the end of this year, we'll most probably finish the condition assessment, put a CIP plan in place for the next 5 years, and then start the design. But construction will most probably not take place before 2028 or 2029.
And just one follow-up comment, I guess it's a question, but you would see that it would just be deferring those costs to future years? The CIP, anything we
Yes.
reduce?
It will differ, but at the same time, we don't really know what is the level of CIP that will be required for this district, just because we have not done the condition assessment. As I mentioned, maybe during the last meeting that we have here, we have a very low main break percentage. We have 1.2 per 100 miles of pipeline. That doesn't mean that we're going to stay at that location because our pipelines are getting older, but it just gives some kind of indication that our pipelines at this point in time, they are in a better shape than others around the nation.
Thank you.
Board Member Ehlers.
And continuing on that exact same question, so was it another 1.25 for the asbestos project that is delayed till roughly 2028?
We actually took $750,000 of asbestos instead of, we had 2025, if you look at the screen, we had $1 million for the next 3 years, and we just reduced that, 2025 to 500, and 2026 to 750. So I just want to mention one thing also. We have carryovers from previous years that will cover that amount that we have reduced. So we did not just abruptly lower it because we found out that we have some monies in our improvements or in our CIP that will cover the amounts that we actually.
And all I was trying to understand is we reduced how much total from the previous projection?
Total? $2.5 million of CIP.
2.5 and
1.25 off from the joint facilities,
And-
750,000 from the asbestos pipeline, and 750 from Lake Hodges.
Okay, great. And so our plans, this still comports with our 2022 Water Master Plan as far as capital investment,
Yes.
and we're still in compliance with what we had planned to do a couple years ago. So back to the 974 acre feet last year. That was from the last fiscal year. And were there any changes in the state dams level during that year? So that was always at the current reduced level.
That is correct.
And it's based on the factors you stated. Great, thank you. Now, let's talk about, did you happen to run numbers? I appreciate the fact I'll call it the 9-12-12 scenario and with the reduced capital, et cetera, giving us our reserve. Did you look at running 999 and what impact under the same assumptions, the reduced capital, what would happen to the reserve in that case? Do you have an estimate or anything like that? Or did you run any lower rate increases?
Well, if we went with 999, my gut tells me, you see that 12 million right there?
Yeah.
That would just plummet.
I think, if I recall correctly, we ran that and it went down from 12 to 9.8 or between 9.8 and 10. If I
say at
recall,
least, yeah.
yeah. I
Because
think
these
that's-
revenue
I think we
adjustments
did.
compound on one another, it's just
Yeah.
like interest in a bank. So your first number is the most important, because every year after that compounds on that first number. But you can see this is a strategic decision here to go light in the first year because you have that impact on your customers from the Lake Hodges,
Yeah.
right? So we're doing the least that we can in year one, and then after that, once your cost of service and the rates are in place, for the next 2 years, there's no more Lake Hodges surprises, and you can continue with the 12%.
So that's cool. I appreciate the fact that you did run the numbers. I'm trying to understand the sensitivity. You know, if it dropped to zero, it'd be.
No.
So the number, I had no idea whether it would drop in half, and so it sounds like 75% is not as bad as what I thought it might
Please do not
be.
quote me for the number, because we were playing, Steve and I and Mary, with the numbers, so I don't recall exactly, but it was lower than the 12 by at least 2.
Yeah,
So
and
I just did it, and
Yeah.
that 12.1 drops to 10.8.
Yeah,
oh,
here we go.
even better.
Yeah, I thought it was 9.8,
Okay.
so. And
And that also tells me the up to has legs, that there is real possibility that we could have lower rate increases in the future and still have a good chance of rebuilding our reserve to the level we target. So, or maybe deferring that another year. And we can make that decision next year and the year after. So, okay, cool. The up to construct, and I think I understood that, and I think Tony understood it, but I'm not sure I did 100%. We do up to so that we don't have to go back through another 218 rate study? And so if we did 9% in the future, or 10% or 11%, whatever it might be, up to 12%, we wouldn't have to redo it for setting it in 2025, 2026, and then we'd do another 218 study for 2027 beyond, right?
Correct. You
Okay,
can
cool.
always implement rates that are lower than what were shown to you, but you can't go above without a Prop 218 hearing.
Okay. And that answered my questions. Thank you.
Clarification, one thing, or we don't do any in 27, we might decide we just want to leave the rates alone, and then we don't have to do any studies, we don't have to go to 218, right? It's driven by you identifying that there is a need for more revenue and because of a variety of factors, and then you come to the board and we consider it.
Yes, and most agencies do that. I mean, we will still have to do a study to run the numbers, make sure everything is fine. But if we find out that there is no need for additional monies, then it will be just.
Okay,
no
we just do the
increases for
smart thing, we
year
do
or
that
the
rate
second
study
year.
and we have that info. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Board Member Hensy.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm pleased to see some of the updated information and the additional research that was put into this study that we have before us today. I'll start with the easy question first, and that is, do we also include those drought rates on our Prop 218 notice that goes out to everybody?
Yes.
So they are aware that if we're in a drought, they could potentially be paying rates up that high. Okay. And then my next question is, of all the updates, I guess the one that just makes me nervous is the new assumption for the water that we get from Hodges. And to me, it seems like every year that the dam is not repaired, it's going to be in worse and worse condition. So this year, you know, we took our number into account, how much we got, but do you think there's any need to factor in the deterioration of future years and be less optimistic about the amount of water we're getting?
Based on the information that we currently have, the restriction level by DSOD is at 280 and is going to continue at that level unless obviously a disaster happens. That's why they ask them for the emergency repairs that they have conducted. But I mean, it's, again, it's a guess. I mean, this is a 100-plus-year-old dam that has some maintenance issues during the past few years. So, but at this point in time, the expectation is it will continue to be at the 280, and we will continue to, because the difference between 280 and 265 is about 2,000 acre-feet that is divided between us and Santa Fe. So that amount of money, of water is in the dam at all times. And again, it's an assumption. It's very hard to have good, solid backup to the information that I'm providing, because we could, for one reason or another, like have no rain whatsoever in one of the years, and then there will not be enough water in there for us to take out the 750 acre feet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I see no other request to speak, but I have a couple comments, and I think, I looked back at what we talked about, I think it was November 8th, and that initial water rate study report. And the direction the board gave you at that time was try to get into high single digits, maybe no higher than 12%, right? And I think you've done some nice changes to get us in a better range. It still feels like a lot, particularly when you look at that slide that shows what single-family homeowners will face, right? Even the ones with low usage have a much higher rate. But it also, then with the benchmarking data, it seems like we are at least not, rising to the top of the heap. We're staying relatively in the middle. So I do thank you all for working on that and coming back with a good proposal. I think at this point, I want to see what additional direction you need, and if we do need a motion at all on this, or if you have.
Thank you, President Blackwell. I think what we need is the approval for these rates so that we come back with a quick presentation during the next meeting and get authorization for Prop 218 based on the numbers that you have in front of you. And if that is the case, then we can proceed that way. Right? Is that anything else that you require? No.
Okay, I see that there was a motion made by Vice President Krantz. I'll second that motion.
Very good. Vice President
I didn't
Krantz?
even speak the words, but it does say I did push the magic button. And yes, so you're going to proceed with a 218 study, bring a study back to the board?
Yeah, during the next regular board meeting, we'll come in and ask for authorization and present this to everybody during a board meeting so that we can proceed with the 218 process.
Okay. Any other discussion before we go to a vote? Okay. Let's have a vote, please. Very good, thank you. With that, there are no other agenda items, so we will call this meeting to a close. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gavel it out.